So in this episode of The Glory of Sport, we'll talk about sports entrepreneurship. And I don't think there's anybody quite as qualified as my guest on this show to talk about that subject. And welcome Parth and welcome Mustafa. Parth, of course, is the managing director of JSW Cement, JSW Paints. But more importantly, I think now the leading figure when it comes to Indian sport. Mustafa, of course, played tennis for India, professional player, and then, of course, now the CEO of JSW Sports. And every time I speak with him, I get the feeling that I'm speaking not to a manager, but to an entrepreneur. So let me take you back, Parth, to a conversation that you and I had a couple of years back. And you talked about the fact that you were bringing sport under the umbrella of JSW because you wanted JSW Cement, JSW Steel to become retail names, to have retail recognition, given how the market dynamics were changing. But I always suspected that deep down, there was just a deep love and passion for sport, which was waiting to manifest itself. And that possibly was the basis of all of this. How true is that?
No, absolutely. I think sport has always been a real passion for not only me, for our entire family. And we've always been looking at ways of supporting sports in India. And this was a very unique opportunity for us to blend, and for me to blend passion with a real business need. And if you look at any of the businesses that we're in, whether it's cement, steel, power, or infrastructure, most recently paint, we are competing with some of the biggest household names in the country. In steel, you're competing with Tata Steel. Tatas are obviously a household name and have been around for generations. In cement, you're competing with the Birla Group, which is again a multi-generation old group. In paint, you have Asian Paints, again, 60, 70-year-old company. So the task of building out the JSW brand was something that was, we had our task cut out for ourselves. And like you rightly said, deep down inside, we had a deep passion to do something great in sport. And we felt that if we can do work in sport in a meaningful way, this could give the brand JSW the impetus that it requires. And that's when, I went with this idea, with this, thesis to the board of JSW Steel that, we must invest in sports in a big way. And that's how we can build our brand. And in 2012, we got the green light, and the rest, as they say, is history.
I think first and foremost, the point that you made that using sport to promote the brand. First and foremost, I think businesses and sports sit a lot closer to each other than people think. There's so much they can learn from each other, and so much that they can benefit from each other. So I think first and foremost, kudos. But what I have the most admiration for, Parth, really is that you did the hard yards. So you went and built the Inspire Institute of Sport, which I was fortunate enough to see. And then, of course, came FC Bengaluru, came Haryana Steelers, Delhi Capitals. So this whole journey of sports entrepreneurship, if we can call it that, what have been the key challenges, and what has given you the most gratification?
I think the biggest challenge was the vision that we had set out for ourselves to make a meaningful impact to Olympic sport in India. Was a very large vision. And, India is such a large country, we really took time to figure out what would be the best way for us to actually move the needle and, move things forward. Because there's so many different stakeholders. There's the government, there's the sports federations, there's the athletes themselves, and then there's us, private bodies like us, trying to help and improve the system. And before us, there were bodies like Mittal Champions Trust. There were bodies like OGQ, which continues to do great work, Go Sports, many foundations as well. But we wanted to do something beyond that. So I think the first challenge was to really understand what is going on in India. And Mustafa, having been in the system, having played tennis for India, having we all know how famous or infamous the All India Tennis Association is. So I think being someone who's grown up in the system, I think he brought in a lot of knowledge about the Indian ecosystem and what needs to be done. And then obviously in tennis, being such a global sport, and countries such as the US and and other countries in the world are so advanced in how they've developed the sport. I think we took a lot of learnings from that, and he and I, jointly worked on this project. And yeah, it was it took us about 2 years visiting facilities all across the world before we really set the blueprint of the IIS, of the Inspire Institute of Sport. And then, yeah, convincing like-minded corporates to support us, convincing the government that we were not trying to do something anti them, we were trying to do something alongside them, and to support them. And the federations were all viewing us very suspiciously when we started signing talent, when we started picking up players. Everyone was viewing us very suspiciously, that we were trying to compete with them. But over time, as things evolved, they understood that we were trying to improve the system. And that's really was very difficult, because some of the federation people, they become very protective about their sports and about their territory. So convincing them that we are here to support was a huge challenge. And then obviously funding was a big challenge, securing that, convincing corporates that our idea is not just an idea, but it's going to be something bigger, was great. And then the success of Inspire Institute, or the idea behind Inspire Institute, led to obviously Bengaluru FC's formation, and focusing on sports science, nutrition, and doing the basics right. What we have seen globally, the best practices, bringing that to the Indian ecosystem, really helped us and gave us success. And once we won the first title with Bengaluru FC, I think both Mustafa and I, our dreams only became bigger and bigger, and we never really looked back after that.
No, I think you talked about the fact that the vision itself was very large, and so the challenge started from there, executing a vision of this scale. When you see that historically India has underperformed in international competition like the Olympics, despite the size of the country, the people, and the fact that we are a very young country. So Mustafa, Parth talked about the role that you played, and the insight that you brought by virtue of being a professional sports person. First and foremost, how was the transition from the journey of being a professional sports person to literally being somebody who is building this up alongside Parth? And second is that very often I'm asked this question, that I don't have a background in sport, but I still want to get into sport. And that could be something as simple as starting a sports management company, a talent management company, or something much bigger. Not everybody can have Parth's vision. But if somebody who was not in your shoes came from a non sporting background, what would your advice be? How do you get into sports entrepreneurship? What are the elements that would then be needed to make a success of it?
So, Ravneet, I think the first part was quite an interesting, first couple of years within the JSW group. As when Parth and I first met, and we knew the direction we wanted to take, but it did. As an athlete, you're very focused on yourself. You win on your own, you lose on your own. You are, especially when you come from an individual sport background, that the buck basically stops with you. And then you land into this monstrous corporate organization of JSW, where you have to kind of really understand the ropes of how to get work done, and how to really push your way through to achieve goals. Because at the end of the day, timelines are timelines, and no one is going to accept excuses on delays, etc. So it's been a great learning to transition from being an athlete to be working in an organization of this magnitude and we've actually done this without deviating from the systems and processes and the governance that are in place for JSW Steel or cement or power. We've and I think that's kind of become one of our strengths. From day one, everyone has talked about the professionalism that we bring in. That's not just from our understanding of sport, but also the combination of the corporate governance and the systems that we've put in place across the board. When we when we just a small thing that when we started Bengaluru FC, the fact that we paid our players on time at the start of the end of the month or the first of every month in itself was considered like, wow, like, they were like, just like, what's going on? Players were expected to play through a season and then hopefully get paid at the end of the season, or they would sign an extension on their contracts in the hope that they would get last season's money. And I mean, and when you just put these simple things in place, it itself makes such a big impact. So yes, we did a lot of things that we look to replicate from best practices in the US, in Europe, and Australia. But we also put very solid systems in place from just a corporate background. So I think that was really important to set us apart from everyone else. With regards to the entering the sports industry or getting into the entrepreneurship side of sport, if you look at, again, the US, Europe, not all the top guys are former athletes that have transitioned into sport. They are all guys who have done either a sports management course or an MBA in sports and have a sports legal background, and then have transitioned into the corporate or the business side of sport. So this thing that you have to be a former athlete to transition into sport is not really the case when you look at it from an international perspective. I think the understanding of the business is obviously very important. We talked about this in one of our earlier chats. Sport, especially even now in India, is getting extremely specialized. So knowing what exactly you're looking to do is important, and which sector you want to specialize in is getting crucial. And having the right education and background to carry forward your vision is I think the most important. I don't think it's that phase of I played tennis, so now I can run a sports business. I think that's not the case, when you look at it from a global perspective.
But it's very interesting that you said that, all the corporate governance and the very high standards that the group set, were also then transposed when it came to JSW Sports, which is interesting because when I look at the financial services sector, I mean, if you look at a bank, the way the retail bank of the bank is run vis-a-vis the corporate bank of the bank is run are two different organizations. Yeah. Even in something which is so professional and cutting edge as financial services, and then to have the group, harmonize governance and best practices across various activities, I think speaks volumes. And of course, Parth, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with the entire generation before yours as well, each of them individually. So I know the discipline that went into them and the love for sport, whether it was golf or whether it was polo, or then of course I know Sajjan's own love for fitness and squash. But the question is that I have for you is that you're a third generation entrepreneur now, and a lot of that is basically now hard-coded into your genes, into your DNA. How different was sports entrepreneurship from, let's say, industrial entrepreneurship?
In sports, the asset is people. And in business, or at least in the businesses we have, the assets are a mix of people and machinery. So I think in sport, I think one of the most challenging things was to get the team right. Even if you look at, and I just want to add to what your earlier question was to Mustafa about non-sports people getting into sports. I think if you look at me, right, I'm a non-sporting person. Like I was never a athlete of any great stature. Like I played at my own level, college level, school level. So I understand sport, but I never was a professional athlete. I think the business of sport actually in many ways is very simple. It's really got to do a lot with getting the team right. It's getting your own management correct, and it's getting the basics right. So when I looked at getting into Bengaluru FC, which was the first team we got into, we understood the business. We understood the business model that revenue comes from three sources primarily. It's your rights, central rights revenue. Number one. Number two is your sponsorship revenue for your jersey, non-jersey assets. And number three is your ticket sales and merchandise revenue, which you make. So once we got understood that very clearly, it was about making sure that across these three streams, we have the right people in place and we start doing the right things in place, like having your social media team on point, having your own YouTube channel where you showcase highlights and you showcase, interactions with your players, and really building your fan base from ground up. So I think that was very important. But to come back to your question on how different it is from an industry or to set up a new business, like I set up JSW Paints, from scratch, and JSW Sports also from scratch. I think setting up the sports business was something that I enjoyed and I continue to enjoy tremendously because it's a mix of passion and business. And right now, in 2012, if someone told me that we will be sitting on 3 franchises and an Olympic institute, we would have contributed to India's Olympic movement, and while we are investing in sports, making money doing all of this, I would have told them that it's not possible, and we're living in the US, we're not living in India. But cricket has really changed the game for in terms of the P&L for sport in India. And I think other sports are now slowly but surely catching up.
I think that again is a very important point in terms of your own journey when you look at it. So typically what happens is when you talk about sport, there is something so pure, something so pristine about sport that the moment you talk about commerce in sport, people tend to balk at that prospect. But the fact of the matter is, I think Indian cricket is a good example that you commercialize the sport and see what it did to India's bench strength. The fact that it took it to the top of the tree in terms of its playing talent, the money that it brought in obviously, and what it did to a lot of the players, right? And I think IPL is a good personification of that. So I don't think there's anything wrong now. At the end of the day, if India needs to become a sporting superpower, I think it needs more enterprise, it needs more vitality, it needs more vigor, which can come from a spirit of entrepreneurship, like you have brought to the table, Parth. The question I have for you is that, do you now think that Indian sport is at the cusp of a major transformation? The reason I ask that question is that first and foremost, when we look at the leagues, including the youngest out of the lot, which is PKL, they have now been around for a while. They have matured. The media rights are beginning to get established. Sponsorship, your affiliations, fan engagement, all of that has changed. Do you think that that piece is now ready to take off, and over the next 18-24 months, we could potentially end up seeing a revolution in Indian sport?
I honestly, Ravneet, have my fingers crossed for Tokyo. If India comes back with 10 medals, which I think that it's my prediction for the games, I think there will be a revolution in this country for Olympic sport. I think the country is waiting for success and is literally starving for success in the Olympics. Whether you now one of the things that we have done at JSW Sports is that we have been promoting our non-cricket talent. We have been managing our non-cricket talent, and we have been approaching brands to get endorsement deals for these athletes, which is also a revenue stream for JSW Sports. It's like a talent management division we have. And over the last 24 months, the kind of interest that our non-cricket talent is seeing is absolutely remarkable. And brands are increasingly looking at these kind of talents. The advent of Bollywood and Bollywood getting interested in these stories is also something which is phenomenal for sport. If you look at Dangal, if you look at the movie that came out with Priyanka Chopra on Mary Kom, or you look at Saina Nehwal's movie, which came out recently, these biopics are showing that there is an appetite for Indian non-cricket sport in India. So in terms of the leagues, I think PKL did a wonderful job in popularizing Kabaddi, and like you rightly said, its media rights are getting established and teams are no longer going to be losing money in PKL. And I think profits will follow. So I honestly feel sport in India is, on the cusp, is actually not on the cusp anymore. I think we've crossed the cusp. I think we're getting there in terms of the ecosystem is developing. Now, the amount of nutrition brands that are launching every year in India, the amount of new physiotherapy clinics that are popping up all across the country, the number of people who are taking sports, science, and nutrition seriously. Now, so many of my friends are now going to dietitians and nutritionists for their own fitness regime. So there are avenues opening up, and I think sports in this decade will be a significant contributor to India's GDP, and also will add a lot of jobs as well.
I totally agree. And Mustafa, as a sportsman yourself, how excited does that get you in terms of this major transformation that's washing over Indian sport?
I mean, I totally agree, and we talk about this frequently, that this next 10 years is going to be an absolute game changer. I think the IPL was a huge game changer in 2008, which kind of gave a lot of confidence to all the other sports and to want to create their own leagues. Some have succeeded, some have fallen by the wayside, but they all attempted. And that gave confidence to young kids to want to get into the administration, the business side of sport, and it has created opportunities. Yes, the last couple of years have set things back a little bit, but I think it's only a matter of time before the sports industry bounces back and we see all the leagues up and running in the way they were. I think pre-pandemic, we were seeing a very clear calendar of sport in India. You had the IPL season, which led into the PKL Kabaddi season, and then the football season followed, and then volleyball was starting to find its place. Table tennis was starting to find its place. So that was really interesting to see. And the great part was, Ravneet, that brands were starting to earmark their budgets depending on these leagues. We didn't have to go and educate them, sir, abhi kabaddi season aa raha hai, can you please look at this, etc. They knew that, hey, when is kabaddi starting? We've kept budgets aside, stuff like that. So those were really positive signs for us when we're looking at it from a franchise ownership perspective. And yeah, I think we saw a great transformation in athletes pursuing sport as a professional career over the last 8 to 10 years, where they were starting to make money. Kabaddi players are making money, baddie players are making money. Obviously cricket, while you look at the top guys, they're making big bucks, but the fringe guys were starting to be sustainable, which was not always the case. While there's a perception that cricketers make a ton of money, not the Ranji guys and the guys just on the Ranji level. Yeah. They were not in making the big bucks. So all of that, we've seen that change in the last 10 years. I think the next 10 years is going to be very much on the commercial side and the entrepreneurship and the business side of sport, where you're going to see a lot more interest and a lot more companies coming through on that.
I couldn't agree more. And one final question, which I'd pose to both of you, is that if you look at right now where Indian sport finds itself, I think the general tendency across the board, whether it's the media, whether it's us armchair critics, etc., is to say that the government hasn't done enough. So then you can go after the Sports Authority of India, you can go after the Ministry of Sport, etc. But the fact of the matter is that we as private citizens have a role to play as well. And we can't just leave everything to the government. I mean, whether it's primary education, primary healthcare, I mean, those are also issues that need a lot of attention. We live in a country which has scarce resources, and those often get prioritized. So for us to just blame everything on the government is also not fair. And in that sense, I think what JSW has done, really stands out. And Parth, you're still just 31, still very early in your journey. But given the fact that JSW took on this responsibility, and I'm so glad that they're also sponsoring the Indian Olympic contingent. Where do you see Indian sport in 10 years' time?
No, so I think Ravneet, the first part of your question, I think I would like to say that we at JSW since 2012, since we got involved in Indian sport, has seen a step change in the government's approach towards sports in India.
I agree.
I think post 2016, the amount of work that the honorable governments have done has been fantastic. Whether it was the launch of Khelo India,
Yes.
whether it was setting up of a commission after Rio to understand, chaired by Abhinav Bindra, to understand what went wrong at Rio, why did India come back with only 2 medals, and what are the steps that India need to take in order to have a better showing in Tokyo, and then how that has translated down the line. The Khelo India movement, when it got launched, I thought it was going to be just another government initiative which will dwindle and it will die out. But today at IIS, we have over 30 Khelo India athletes who are training at IIS, and we get the money on time from Government of India. They pay 5 lakh rupees per athlete per year on time. And there are a list of, I don't know how many more athletes waiting to get into IIS. So the government has changed. Their approach has changed. They are working in tandem with the athletes. They are working in tandem with the federations and with us. And honestly, these 120 athletes who are going to Tokyo, I don't think even one of them can say that they did not get support, or they did not get infrastructure, they did not get the facilities that any other athlete in the world got. They got everything and more. In fact, we probably do more for our athletes than 90% of the world does now. So I think government has changed. Now it will take some time for it to change at the grassroots level. And that's what organizations such as ours are trying to do. And the federations have become very, very positive. There's no more negativity. There's no more blame game. Most federations have become very positive. So I think as citizens, as corporates, I think we are very fortunate that this realization has come, and government is really proactively looking at sport. I think over the second part of your question, where do I see sport in 10 years? I think the one area where India lacks and is far behind the world is in ingraining or making sports as part of the school curriculum. I think that is an area where we are very behind. We don't have a collegiate program like the NCAA in the US. We don't have a robust school program. Yes, you have pockets, like you have the MSSA, which does a fantastic job in Mumbai. But across the country, there is no school network. There is no, as a kid growing up in Mumbai, I never played a team in Delhi, or I never got an opportunity to play in Bangalore. I never played any sport against any of the other cities. So in the colleges, it's the same thing. You never have a Jai Hind college playing Punjab University in football. It just doesn't exist. And NCAA is being the feeder system to US Olympic sport. We lack that in India. I think that's going to be a huge effort, and I see that developing. And I see organizations, really looking at that in a big way. I see governments looking at that as a big way, because you can't really replace that. There's no better way to scout talent than having a robust school system and having a robust college system. So I see that, and in terms of where I see the industry grow, I think I see tremendous growth in the industry. I see a lot of talent from manufacturing, from consulting coming into the sporting world. Like if you look at likes of Dream 11, you look at what Harsh Jain has been able to create. It's absolutely wonderful. It's phenomenal. Now, like that, there will be many sports startups, sports ventures that come up, And Mustafa has started an incubator now at JSW Sports, where he's incubating ideas and incubating businesses in sport. So I think this is the future for sure.
Awesome. Mustafa, would you like to add anything to what Parth had to say?
No, I think I totally agree. I think the base of the pyramid is definitely going to get wider. Be it the added importance that people are giving on their own health, fitness regimes. You're going into conversations where people are talking about sleep patterns and recovery and stuff like that, which is like, I mean, if you were not a professional athlete, you would never discuss that at a casual gathering. And what your meal plans and your calorie count and stuff like that. So that's only going to, the more it gets ingrained in our system, and I'm not just talking about, just Bombay, Delhi's, but it's happening across the country where health, fitness is really getting ingrained. And I think a lot of credit goes to a lot of our elite athletes, including the likes of Virat, that have made fitness such an important part of their day-to-day life. And I think that's going to help get more kids wanting to play sport better. I have guys, people come and you've been to our office, we are 800-900 people, and I kid you not, randomly people will come in and say, my son has started playing baddie, what should he eat, what should he, how much should he train, and stuff like that, which is great. I love having these conversations, because that just means whether they make it or not is secondary, but at least they're going through that grind. So I think that's going to be a huge change, that the base is getting wider. And yeah, like Parth mentioned, we have started this accelerator program, and it's really cool to see some of the stuff that people are thinking about, and we're excited to help them get off the mark and with these ideas. So yeah, if we need more Dream 11s and MPLs and in the sports ecosystem here in India that provide employment and allow, like I said earlier, all those guys who have a passion for sport but went down the conventional route of engineering or becoming CAs or doctors and now want to transition into the sports industry in some shape or form. So that, I mean, if those guys get the opportunity, then you're just going to keep raising the bar. And I think that's something that will be very important for the industry over the next 8 to 10 years.
One of the things which I will never tire of saying is that there is not a single great nation on planet Earth which is not a sporting superpower.
Absolutely.
And I think, India needs to get there as well. And in that respect, I can't, commend enough what JSW is doing with regard to Indian sport, the way you're transforming Indian sport. So very best wishes. Thank you so much for coming on the show. As always, so insightful and so much to learn from. But most of all the very best. And I hope that you continue to do the pioneering work that you have done so far. Good luck.
Thank you,
Ravneet. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for always supporting all our initiatives.
No, absolute pleasure, and continue to go from strength to strength. All the very best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.